Alright, in this video I'll be making a pathetic attempt to revive the reading habit in Singapore. The book I'm recommending is The Last Girl by Nadia Murad. Nadia Murad is an Iraqi woman. She's also one of the Nobel Peace Prize winners in 2018. Now, Nadia was born in 1993 in the village of Kocho in northern Iraq, near the border with Kurdistan. She missed out on the first Gulf War, which took place in 1991, but she did experience the second Gulf War in 2003. After the second Gulf War, Nadia noticed tremendous changes in her village in Kocho. She belongs to this Yazidi tribe, which has its own monotheistic religion, quite different from Islam. There were only about 650,000 of them in Iraq. Now, after the defeat of Saddam, the Kurdish forces took over and they built all kinds of telecommunications infrastructure. Nadia suddenly saw Saddam vanish from all the TV programs, and she began to pick up Kurdish, more or less like a first language. Arabic was something she learned in school. But unfortunately, at this time, something was brewing, and that was the tension between the majority Shia Muslims and the minority Sunni Muslims. Now, the Shia Muslims were ruling Iraq, and there was a lot of dissatisfaction from the Sunni Muslims. And from that, ISIS germinated. Now, Nadia and her family lived a very quiet life until 2014, when ISIS invaded her village and Kurdish forces fled. That was when they took the villagers prisoners and offered them a choice whether to convert to Islam or face persecution. Now, incredibly, practically none of the villagers converted. So they were gathered, the men were pulled out and brought to trenches where they were executed with firing squad. Now, for the women who had children, they were brought to ISIS camps to look after their children, and the children were trained to become ISIS fighters. The young ladies, they were sold into sex slavery. Unfortunately for Nadia, she was one of them, and her first owner was this man by the name of Haji Salman, and subsequently she was sold no less than 7 times until she ended up in the city of Mosul. Now, one evening, her captors failed to lock the doors, so Nadia managed to escape onto the streets. Now, she was still on the streets. She could have been caught anytime. So she was desperately looking for a family who would take her in. But she didn't know who would take her in. So she knocked on the door of this very poor Sunni Muslim family. And quite incredibly, they took her in. Instead of turning her in for a reward, they risked their lives to help her to escape. The eldest son in this family, his name was Nadia. He got some fake IDs made, and then he pretended to be Nadia's husband, and the two of them sneaked out of Mosul, and they made their way into Kirkuk. Kirkuk was a Kurdish-controlled city because it was rich in oil, so the Kurds saw that it was important to control it. So even when ISIS invaded, they saw that as a priority to control Kirkuk. And Nadia and Nasir made their way to Kirkuk, and that was how she was saved. After that, she was transferred to a refugee camp, and from there, Germany offered a refugee program to accept these Yazidi minority refugees into Germany. So that's where Nadia ended up. She told her story at the United Nations, and in the year 2018, she shared the Nobel Peace Prize with another winner. Nadia is also the founder of the Nadia Initiative. This is an organization that helps victims, or rather survivors of genocide and victims of human trafficking. Now in Iraq during that time, there was also reverse human trafficking. There were some smugglers operating in Iraq where they would get the girls who were sold into slavery and then smuggle them out of ISIS-controlled territories into safety. Now, of course, a lot of the violence and the atrocities described in this book are very unfamiliar to those of us who grew up in safe and sheltered Singapore. But there's one thing which I find to be even more unfamiliar, and that is the courage with which some of the people in Iraq stood up for their beliefs and their principles. Imagine you are threatened by ISIS. Would you behave like the Yazidis who stood up for what they believe in and go against ISIS? Or would you just surrender? I think the latter is far more possible in Kiasu and Kiasi, Singapore. What about Nazir? He could have turned Nadia in for a reward, but he chose to risk his life to save her. To him, he was doing the right thing. So it's the same with a lot of people who are risking their lives, who are fighting for their own rights and their freedom. It's not fair for us to judge when we are not in their shoes. So if you are interested in the details, do grab a copy of this book. It's available on Amazon. That's where I got it. Do read it. I'm sure you'll find it a very enriching experience. Thank you for watching.